Again, and welcome back. We're going to continue working on our React project, and in our last video we solved challenge number 9 here, and we displayed all of the products. So I've got all the buttons up here, and then I've got all the products down below here. And in the next challenge number 10 here, I'm going to scroll to number 10, we need to add some interaction. So the idea here is that if we were to click on one of the category buttons, right, like one of these buttons, will only display the items in that category, okay? This is going to take a couple steps, okay? So first of all, we'll need a way for our app to keep track of which button was selected and what the name of that category is. Right, so for example, if I clicked on this button, it would say electronics, right? And that would be the category name, right? And then the second half of this is, besides keeping track of that value, like the name of the category, we'll also have to filter the list of products so that we only display the products that have a category that matches the selected category name, okay? Okay, so let's go back to our code and get started. So I'm going to go back to the code, and I'm going to go to our app.js, okay? And if I look at the structure of the app here, you can see that I've got a div, and then I have this h1 and this paragraph and this other paragraph here, and then I have the category list and the product list. And so what needs to happen here is clicking on a button that's inside the category list, right? So all the buttons here are inside this component. Clicking on one of these buttons needs to inform the product list, right, of which product or which category was selected, right? So that means that the parent element needs to hold that value because it can pass the value down to these two components, right? So let's talk about that for a moment, right? Let's do a quick experiment and talk about how we're going to do that, right? So, if we look at the values or the components that we have here, right, let's turn, this looks kind of like the header for my page. So why don't we turn this into a component, right? So you'll see where we're going to go with this in a minute, right? So I'm going to make a new component for the header. And what I'll want to do is pass some values into the header to tell it what to display, okay? So I'm going to make a new file. I'll save it as header.js. There we go, right? Put it in my source directory, and I'll make a new function here called header, uppercase, and then this function will return, and I'm going to actually copy that code out of the other file in a moment, but let's set this one up. So I'm going to do export default header, okay? And then that header information, I'm going to put it in here. Maybe I'll even wrap it in an extra div here, because that might be nice to have. Let's give it a class name too. So we'll just follow the same pattern here, and we'll name this after the component. And maybe we'll need a style sheet, so I'll just follow the same pattern, and I'll save this as header.css. And I'll just put a class rule in there, and then in our component here, I'll import header.css. Okay, so that's all set up, and now we just need a little bit of information here. So I'm going to go back to app.js, and I'm going to cut all of this information here, right? So the heading for the page, the title, and the counts, right? Okay, so I'll remove that, and I'll paste it in here, okay? Now, I'm kind of missing something, right? Because this, the data that I display here needs to come from somewhere. So let's go back here and import, and then we'll see where that comes from. So I'm going to import header from header like this, right? And then I'm going to get an error because it's going to say data is not defined in here. So let's get rid of that, right? And then it won't like that I have the empty curly brackets here, but we'll ignore that. We're going to fill these in a moment, right? Well, actually, maybe it doesn't care. Oh, well, yeah, it'll probably care when I add it here. So let's put header here. So now that's where it was before. Actually, I guess it still shows up. So now what I want to do here is I want to pass down the two pieces of information, like the product count and the category count. Okay, so I want to pass those into this component. Okay, so you know, I could import them here, but sometimes we want to pass, you know, props, or we want to, they call it props, right? We want to pass like values into a component, right? So what I'm going to do is inside the header.js, I'm going to add a props variable here, right? And props is always an object, so we can deconstruct it. So I'm going to say const, and I'm going to deconstruct this into, how about product count and category count. Okay, so I'll deconstruct that from props. Okay, so this object right here, actually, you know, even before we do this, sometimes people get confused. I'm going to leave that out. We'll add that in later, right? What I want to do is I want to take the props and then get the product count from props like this. So I want to say props.product count, okay? And then here I want to say props.category count, okay? And now where are these going to get their values? Like I don't see the value here on the page yet. You can see it kind of back here, right? So where are they going to come from? If I go to app.js, this is the component we're creating, and if I want to pass in values for, actually maybe I can do this. Let's put them side by side here, right? Okay, if I want to pass down a value for product count and a value for category count right here, what we'll do is inside the component, like where the component is defined, we'll set this up like an attribute in HTML. So we'll say product count, count here like this, equals, and then I can give it a value, right? So this is going to be data.length. Okay, so product count here, the name of this attribute matches the name here of props dot like this name, right? Okay, and if I look here, you can see now that 100 is showing up here. Okay, and we can do the same thing. You try it on your own, right? So what you want to do is you want to add a new attribute here for category count, right? Give that a try and see if you can do it. You can stop the video and give it a try. Okay, so how did you do? Here is the solution here, right? I'm going to add a new prop here like this, set it equal to, and then the value is going to be, what is it going to be? Unique categories dot length. Okay. I know that came out kind of long. It's kind of running off the edge of my page here. So what I think I'll do is I'll move these each to their own line. There we go, right? That's perfectly okay. So now you can see I've got header, and then I'm including the product count as a prop, and then I'm passing a value to it. And that manifests or appears in the component itself in the props object, right? So this is an object and it has properties, and all the properties are the values that you set as attributes on the tag, or the, you know, the component when you define it, right? Okay. I don't know, maybe this is more the component definition, right? And this is like where we're using the component, right? Okay, so now imagine this. What if we had the category name stored here? We could pass it into the product list, and the product list could do the filtering for us, right? Also, since the component here is going to do the you know, the decision making, like when you click a button, we can pass a function to it to say like, hey, why don't you, you know, when someone clicks a button, why don't you call this function and tell us which category was set, okay? Okay, so there's props, right? So that's like an important piece of React and how components work, right? So props are values that we pass into components to configure them, right? It makes them more useful, right? It makes them more flexible, right? So, you know, if we could use this in any project or on any page and the number of products could change, right? We could also pass in the name right here as a prop, right? Let's try that just for fun, right? As long as we're deconstructing, or as long as we're kind of experimenting with this, right? Why don't we give this a title, right? So I'll put title here. And since it's a string, I don't need to put this in the curly brackets, right? So let's call it product, productify. Okay, that's a weird word, right? So we'll call that productify, right? And now if I want to use that value here, I'll do the same thing, curly brackets, props dot title, okay? And that should give us the same thing here, right? Okay, so let's take this one step further, right? So as long as we're working with props, there's JavaScript gives us a couple tools to make our lives easier and, you know, make it easier for us to work with props or with objects in general, right? So here I have the props object, but you know, I'm doing a lot of props dot, like I'm repeating this block of code here, right? This word everywhere, right? So we can do this deconstruction here. So I'm going to say const, and this works with any object. It's not specific to React. So this is just general JavaScript, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a variable, right, for each of the properties on the props object. So in a way, it's kind of like I'm doing this. It's kind of like I'm saying const, oops, sorry, there we go, const title equals props dot title. Okay, and this is kind of a common operation, right? So, you know, then maybe I want to get product count equals product count category count, category count equals props dot category count, right? And then here I could remove the extra variable, right? So now my code is a lot nicer, you know. I did have to do some extra work up here, right? But this part is a lot easier to read. But we can go one step further. So here I made a separate variable for each one, but JavaScript gives us a shortcut for this. And it looks like this. I kind of just started with it automatically because it's a really great way to work. But what we're going to do is I'm going to make all three of these variables in one line, right? So I'll say product count, category count, right? So here, this one line right here is going to be the same as these three lines, right? So instead of doing the three lines here, I can do the same process right there in one line. So this object, I can deconstruct it into the properties that are on the object. And I'm just making a variable for each one that will be a constant, okay? And then we can look at our page and it still looks the same, right? Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk about, actually maybe that's the talk about props. The next step that we need to do is we need to talk about state. So I think what I'll do is I'll stop the video here and then I'll make another video for that, okay? So thanks for watching. Give that a try and look for any other place where you can deconstruct any of your properties, okay? And then use that. This is a great syntax, okay? So thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.